Good evening. Sorry for the delay. We're getting our technology up and running. Good evening, and we have some young participants back there. Hi. Hi. Well, I'm so glad you're here. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Of course.
Welcome. This is the New London Housing Commission meeting of November 20th. Primary focus is to kind of debrief, somewhat of a soft and flowing discussion about things we may have learned. We have some hard feedback. We'll get to that from our consultants. Zach Brohinsky is joining us via Zoom. Hi, Zach.
Hi, everyone.
Zach, can you hear us?
Can hear you loud and clear, Peter.
You can. Okay, terrific. I'll try to keep an eye on you if you have any questions. So just raise your hand or comments, jump in. Following the agenda then, from a governance standpoint, we have our 6 full-time members of the commissioners here. So should we have any voting, which is not likely, we are fully staffed and we have a quorum. As I said, the primary focus is debriefing and feedback from a community forum. One of the wonderful things about our commissioners respectively, is that everybody has a wonderful network of friends and associates and family and people they talk to. So one of the risks of gathering information is it can be anecdotal and it can be viewed as being that much more forceful because it's somebody you know well and is leaning in on it. So it's important when we listen to anecdotal stories or comments from loved ones or family or friend that we try to keep it in perspective of the whole statistics within the town. And I know that's hard for me. I love and pay a lot of attention to my wife, but she's just one opinion, for example. Very strong opinion inside the walls of the house.
And the only one that back.
Yeah. Since this is being recorded, I want to make that clear. So I will also apologize. There is a handout there, which there are 2 pieces that were sent to me by Resilience Planning and Design, Zach and Steve and Liz's team, that apparently was sent to me yesterday, and either was a failure of mine or my limited technology at home. I didn't see it. So you have it tonight, and we will try to skim through it and touch on a little bit, but there's some meat to it. There are 2 pieces. One of them is a 4 or 5 piece, that's 4 or 5 page piece that says Paths Home on the upper right, and the top page says Mad Lib Activity. And the last page is specific questions or comments pertaining to the data presented, 17 note cards. The pages are not numbered, but Mad Lib Activity is the first. And that the copies there were not stapled, so you kind of have to sort that out. I have a few extras that are stapled, so if you didn't get one,
I might take one of those because I thought our copier stapled them automatically.
that's all right.
Didn't realize that until now.
That's all right. Does everybody have
I
a
had to
copy?
take the first page.
You need one? Here you go.
So someone's missing the first page. So I took it.
Members of the public, you all got one of these. This is good stuff. The other piece is technology at work. And it's called a word cloud. Everybody see this word cloud, which is this was the putting into the computer the words responding to the question, how would you define housing in New London? And the strength, the size, and color actually of the word is emphasized, and the most common ones repeated are in the middle. So as you can see, expensive was one that was quite common, and even limited. Sparse, lack, low, locals, lovely, cautiously, unwelcoming, great. So anyway, it's just way of trying to get a sense of what sentiment is, which we will continue to do. So we also have some other comments that came in, and I made a copy for you, actually sent it around to you. It was a letter that came in through Adam, addressed to me, called, says, Dear Peter Nichols, Dear Mr. Peter Nichols, regarding Paths Home. You probably don't have a copy with you, but I did send it to you, and I didn't make copies. So let me maybe the good way to start is to just go through this. And I'd kind of like to parse these comments a little bit to understand, first of all, is it a question or a comment? Does it have a lot of weight to it? Is this person really vested in this issue? Are they upset? Are they just passing along a comment or passing along a question? And some of that can just be somebody who's very thoughtful and saying it diplomatically, but they may be feeling it quite strongly. So you have to kind of read into that what the situation is. Again, we're trying to understand sentiment of our community. So one of the things it said, in the midst of an identified housing crisis, how shall the town of New London proceed? It was stated the mostly senior people are moving in for various reasons and not younger people. This was identified as dangerous. Trying to think, where did we say it was dangerous? Anybody know?
See, sorry, but I don't really think that refers to the meeting,
No?
because he didn't make it to, he or she did not make it to the
Okay,
meeting.
okay.
Right,
So
it-
I
Yeah.
had a,
We received it the weekend.
Before.
Talks the weekend before the forum. I believe the person, I mean, they didn't sign it, so it's hard to tell, but I think the person may have attended our regular commission meeting the week prior. And so I think it was the RKG presentation at that meeting where we got into the imbalance of age demographic, when the conversation may have been had. But my recollection is that I don't remember if dangerous specifically was used, but the conversation was around the imbalance not being a sustainable balance of age. So I think maybe it was a misunderstanding of, we can't have a community entirely of a population that may rely on people of other ages and demographics.
so back to Peter's point, the whole letter can then be tilted because it refers to something that people would have to have your explanation to know about,
Right, and would have attended the forum and perhaps.
and would have attended the forum
Right.
to give further context.
Right, so let me just touch on, and we're gonna hear these themes over and over again, so, but I haven't seen the concern about transportation very often. And this says, if New London is not conducive to the changes in character and impact from increased building and other nearby towns, cities are, why not consider investing in improved and efficient transportation options? Why is that the only solution being investigated is to live in the town in which you're working? A person could live within driving distance to New London and work here. Another point that was raised was water resources, which we'll see in other cases is often lumped together with infrastructure. Completion of more comprehensive impact upon all age level residents. Given the predicted increases in housing and need for student attendance in schools, busing and medical needs, etc., taxes will most likely increase again. Has that been included in the decision-making process? So taxes are something we've heard about. We should be addressing that. Also include the dynamics and consequences among the present residents of population growth, which is an issue of preservation of town character and sort of I like it the way it is. So we need to talk about that. There's a concern here about where would the seniors move to. At the moment, there are few options available within reasonable financial constraints. Heard that before, and I think we pointed that out at the forum. Another comment related is right now, there are very few places for seniors with restricted income to find alternative and life-giving residences. So just to touch on some of the things, I want to get that out there. So let's step back, I think, more on a casual basis to talk anecdotally about some of the comments we have heard. And also specifically, if you would, when you relate some, if you would pass along, if it seems to you that there may be a solution or, a way to address that kind of concern specifically, or maybe not, just what are you hearing?
Just
No?
press the button in the middle. Yep.
Maybe I should start because I might have to pull the ripcord here at any moment. My wife is stuck in Maine on a work trip, and so here we are. So I know I sent an email, and I think that was circulated, so many of you may have already seen some of the things that I've heard. I did want to just frame that email a little bit and mention that I have a lot more that I didn't include in that email that was really quite positive, particularly among some folks who really came to that meeting at my behest, and probably wouldn't have attended had I not asked them to. But they graciously came, and they were, folks maybe similar to me, who were parents, have kids in the schools, and have encountered some of the same issues that my wife and I have encountered, where you can draw a straight line between a lack of affordable housing, childcare, or teachers, or some of these really critical issues that we're facing. And I think overwhelmingly the feedback was that it was really great. It was, felt like this is a really nice way to make, kind of data-driven decisions, and the data was really helpful. Yes, it certainly can reinforce things that maybe were already obvious, but it was nice to have that supported with, some hard facts. So that feedback was really nice, and I think really positive. Some of the things that I put in my email were, a number of them I actually didn't hear firsthand. They were from my wife, but I trust her as a source. She ended up having a number of conversations this weekend with folks that she happened to overhear, and unfortunately she kind of ran a day to talk with them. And there were a couple themes. One was this idea of just kind of framing the problem. And it felt maybe a little bit like that may have been an area for improvement as we think about future meetings, to really talk about what the problem is. Because I think if we can start to get some agreement or some alignment on what the impact of not having enough sort of diverse and the word affordable is latent, but a range of different housing options that could appeal to people at different levels of income or stages of life. Then we can maybe have a more productive conversation about what those solutions can be. But the sense I have is from some of the feedback that I've heard is that there isn't even alignment on that. Sort of this idea that I bought my house here 10 years ago for $250,000 and I'm fine, and that's a you problem, and I think if we have more of a framing around why this is an all of us problem, whether you're 85 or 45, that may help to kind of frame the conversation in maybe a more kind of mutually productive way. And maybe to do that is hearing people's stories. I have a couple. I've lived here just 4 years, and I have some pretty meaningful stories about how this issue has affected me. I know business owners in town probably have similar stories. So that might be something we want to think about highlighting. I presume some of this has probably happened in the past, but I know I haven't been at every meeting, and people who were there last Wednesday may have not been at some of those meetings as well. So it may be worth, even having a few chestnuts that are there to just kind of reframe things every time we get together. The other thing that we heard about, and I took a lot of notes I left in my car, so I'm referring to my own email. Just anytime there are consultants, that just opens the door for people, particularly if they are sort of antagonistic to the idea, to shut down what they're hearing, even if what they're hearing is really valid and good and supported. So that just suggested that we might want to think about in future meetings, maybe having a balance of those of us here, other community members, to sort of maybe present some of the data, and then have our consultants there to help support us in that. That perhaps that might just make it feel a little bit less like, who are these people from out of town? They don't understand where we live, that kind of, which again, this does not represent my own feelings. I'm just saying that this is wrapped up in things that we've heard. And then there was one particular piece of head scratching misinformation that I think just speaks to the fact that we have to frame things in a really deliberate way. And this is what allowed or encouraged my wife to kind of jump into the conversation in a positive way, of course, which is that the town of New London, because there was a lot of emphasis on how many houses are not occupied throughout the year, there was a sense that the town of New London was going to seize unused properties by eminent domain and divide them up into tenements or, multifamily housing or whatever the words were, which of course nobody said. That was certainly never the intention, I think, of anybody speaking, but perception is reality, whether you feel it or not, and that was that person's reality, and that person was talking to other people and sharing that perspective, and so, in a small town, maybe it doesn't take too much of that to really start to frame the issue in a way that we don't want it framed. So that, obviously we can't preempt every piece of information, misinformation that's out there, but we might want to think about if we're sharing a piece of data, like look around, 1 out of every 3 houses that you see in town is not occupied for more than 6 months out of the year. Make it clear that we're saying that because it may give the perception that we have lots of different places to live in town, but many of them are not used in that way. So when you think about the housing stock, a third of it is off the table because it's being used for second homes. Not that second homes are bad in any way, but that's just our reality. In any case, those are just some bits of feedback that
Let me just jump in here also. Thank you. That's very helpful. And I did, Pat, with your permission, I passed that along, and so the commissioners have had a chance to think about that. I'll also add in that fear category that you just mentioned, the eminent domain. I think of that as a fear problem, and of course, misinformation. I ran into the same thing that came to me, very conservative person who had heard a close friend of his or hers say to them they were concerned that that this initiative was going to try to build housing for immigrants to come to the town. That's a fear. I mean, it is what it is, right? So you have to be aware that those comments are out there. So, I mean, I kind of picked up my jaw a little bit and said, okay, that sounds right. Just adding on to that, there is a certain fear factor. People,
as the son of an immigrant, that makes me feel a particular way. I think, yeah, I can imagine that
it's horrible.
We're all immigrants.
Right.
That's
We all came from somewhere.
Absolutely. I did also just want to, I mean, we can stop talking.
No, please.
Just the point that was made in the letter that you quoted around taxes as well. I feel that that's going to be something that always comes up. That's again, probably in the fear bucket. And maybe this is something that we can do some more work on as a committee or as a, involving our consultants in this in some way. I'm not a tax policy expert, and I worry that anytime you start talking about taxes, things can go off the rails pretty fast. But I know enough to know that if we take the position that our town is full, we're done building, this is what we have is what we're going to have forever. The costs of maintaining our town will continue to rise regardless. And the more heads that we have to spread that around on, the potentially lower our each individual's tax burden would be. And also, speaking to the letter, the author of that letter made a perfectly reasonable and impassioned point where we could have more types of housing for people who are, let's say, 80 years old and living in a 4-bedroom house that they don't really need or want any longer, to perhaps downsize into and stay in town that would come with a lower tax burden. So it's sort of connecting maybe some of those dots a little bit. We can't tell people that their taxes aren't going to go up because they will always go up over time. But the truth is, it's possible that they could go up at a lower rate. We have more housing.
well, that's right. As soon as you build more, whether it's residential or commercial property, it adds to the denominator when determining what the tax rate's going to be.
Right.
It's the value of property is in the denominator.
Right.
And that's what goes into the rate. So, so that's very true. Zach, maybe, are you listening? Can you hear me?
Yep.
I believe there are some studies done on this issue of development versus tax effect. I know Mark Fougere had said there was one. You've seen some can you talk a bit about how we might, not now how we do it, but how we would in the future address this issue of tax increase?
Yeah, truthfully, I would have to, it's not my specialty, it's not my background, so I would rather not. I don't want to make a comment that is incorrect, so I've already made a note in my notes here. And we'll bring it up with Steve and also pass it on to Mark to hear his thoughts and see if Mark can pass on the study that he referenced, I forget in what meeting.
Yes, and I know Mark Fougiere's done one. This is the classic problem, of course, as a retired developer, that anytime a developer comes into town, is gonna raise taxes. Well, perhaps taxes will go up gradually. They're always going up, but what it does is it adds to the denominator, the total tax value of property in the town. So there is also the discussion we'll get to later about the impact on schools, which would be part of that impact study as well. So points well taken.
I was gonna mention that because we certainly have seen studies. Everybody always says, oh, younger people are gonna bring kids, you know, more kids in school, taxes are gonna go up, yada, yada, yada. We've seen several of those over our time together that prove that that's not the case. So that was in the back of my mind when we were talking about that.
I want to make a comment about what Neil said, or extend it a little bit further. How to soften the next forum. I think people continue to misunderstand workforce housing. I think it would be helpful as to have presenters, someone who has applied for workforce housing and how and if they qualify. Because I don't think they understand there's a range of income. Well, number one, they have to be working. Number two, there's a range of income that give them their rent until it goes into market value. Because people think the immigrants are going to get that house, whoever they are. And I think that we really need to have a demonstration of how workforce housing qualifies.
That would be workforce housing with the classic capital W workforce housing, correct? Yeah. So and you may remember we invited a workforce housing manager, sort of a management company that came to speak to us about how they qualify people and that one of the services they render to the various landlords and property owners.
I think we need to do that on a much softer level of somebody who's working in London who might be able to qualify for workforce housing. Somebody who works at Hanford, somebody who works at the hospital, somebody who works at the college. Let's not think this is real. It's not just a bunch of formal presenters.
Right.
And again, that's just softening that because we need their help to transport the information they know, but we also need to the community involved somehow.
Bring it home. Yeah, to Neil's point, storytelling would be very powerful.
Peter, if I could just add there, I think it would be I think it's a great idea, and there could be a complement with Mark Fougere, who in our circles is the workforce housing specialist. So to have, some facts presented by Mark, and then to soften that message a bit by someone in town, I think is a great idea. And how Mark gets involved, I don't know, but in our circles, he's the workforce housing expert.
There was Marilyn, I think you were there. There was a meeting at First Baptist Church.
Oh, yes.
That was put, and there was a video played of Community and Consequences was the name of the book. And there has since been Community and Consequences, Roman numeral 2, that's been published. I have a copy of it. I don't know if they put that in video form, but that was the beginning of the presentation. It just so happened to be in a meeting room at the First Baptist Church, which is used for a lot of public things, gratefully. And then following that, there was I believe a woman, a nurse or a teacher or somebody who spoke up and very compellingly told her story about how she was having trouble finding a place to live. So, you remember that, Marilyn?
Yeah.
That was very effective.
Definitely,
That included the BNA,
yeah,
which, remember, it was
it's in the hospital.
and the BNA, the hospital, and it really kind of drove the point home, if you will, in a nice way for people to understand how it affects them, especially those people who, as the writer of the letter is pointing out about seniors, that well, that would be something we want that demographic to see.
Good points. So I would put on all of our to-do lists to think about people you know, who we might consider inviting, because I think this is a stellar idea.
Teachers.
Yeah.
I'm out of the elementary, I'm finally out of the elementary school.
Yeah, my now 8-year-old was in 2nd grade last year, and his teacher came out of retirement because the teacher that they had offered a job to could not find any reasonable place to live, and she eventually just turned down the job. So it was on a wing and a prayer. My son didn't have a teacher at all last year. So again, this is not a vague abstraction. It's here and now and right here.
I hope,
Go ahead, Marilyn.
yeah, going back to that presentation at Baptist Church. That was the first compelling presentation of the problem that I had seen. And it was excellent. And it defined the problem right then and there. And a lot of people I felt went away saying, yeah, we've got a problem. And then we sort of followed it up with our first thing, which also helped to define the problem. But in talking to some people, while they thought it was very well done, the information was interesting and useful, I think somehow they lost sight of what the goal was, why we were gathering this. It was sort of weird to me in a sense, you know, well, okay, so now, and then there was no like, well, what are we gonna do next? Well, they clearly said the next step was X. But it just didn't seem to all come together for people in some way.
So this is, I asked, actually, Marilyn, I happened to mention that similar thing to that maybe there's an opportunity where we could have connected our first forum, which was however long ago, and what was done, kind of the key takeaways from that, and kind of going and to bring it along and connect it up to what we were doing on Wednesday, so people have a clear, okay, it was this, and we discovered this, and now here's this to think about and wrapping it up, and then the next one will be. So I feel like maybe there was an opportunity that we missed to kind of be a little more cohesive.
Yeah, I think we've been so into it for so long that we're assuming that everybody's along the same track. And that they're connected from the Baptist church to the thing we had at Kearsarge to, oh, okay, we now know the problem, here's the beginning steps of the solution. And then I heard some feedback that, well, what's next? And I think I said to you in an email or something, we can't wait until mid-winter to try to keep people on board. I just don't think we can do that. I mean, what is the next step? So, I don't know how we do it, but the plan is good, but I just don't feel like everybody was engaged and right as much as we certainly are.
It's a good point, but I think perhaps I could have done a better job framing it. And I think in retrospect, that's a very good point. One of my hopes was that the facts would, and the fact that we were in this program, a 3-stage program, we all know what it is, so I don't need to repeat it, that the facts would start to make people say, oh, yeah, we do, now I understand better why we do have this problem. What you're saying is we jumped over that step a little too much. And I also wanted to be sure that when we revealed these facts, that it didn't seem like we were headed towards a particular conclusion of rezoning amendments like crazy, but that we wanted to let the community absorb these facts and eventually help us decide whether we would do that or not. And I did hear a little bit of feedback from some who said they thought it was balanced, that it wasn't biased. Although we are the Housing Commission, And these are housing experts we have helping us, that it was unbiased.
That's great.
Peter, can I just add one point there that,
Yeah.
just to piggyback on your comments, it was not the intent of the forum and presentation to assume there was a problem or is a problem, that we were simply presenting facts. And to your point, allowing the public and audience to understand if they think there is a problem here. If they don't think there's a problem, if they think everything is perfectly fine, that's one takeaway. So I think there was a deliberate choice and decision early on to not frame it that way. Whether that was right or wrong can be discussed, and maybe we adjust that going forward. But it was a deliberate decision early on to lay these facts out, not explain to people that, listen, there is a problem, but rather to let the facts speak for themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting, Marilyn, your point's very well taken about communal memories, and of course, my memory's pretty bad too, but you know, we did have those two sessions. We had, the first session was talking about what the need is, and the
Yeah,
hospital was
that
there and the
was very
VNA was, but that was 2 years ago.
Yeah. But it was very clearly presenting a problem, clear as day. And so in some people's mind who did remember, maybe this maybe should have been to them more along with the, okay, we talked about the problem, we know there's a problem, so what's the solution? You know, now, where are we going for a solution? I don't know, I think it was valuable, don't get me wrong, and I think it was valuable just enough, the number of people that came out and just engaged. Yeah, I think I don't know how we would have done it any differently, but it just seems like it just missed, just missed a little bit.
Yep, good point. Maybe if we get into some storytelling, it will sort of get us back to that point where people say, oh yeah, now I know where the facts fit in.
Well, think about the Baptist church thing and our first meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
the employers and whoever's were telling stories of the people they couldn't hire, and the people who couldn't find a place to live, and that terrible, sad story about the lady that wanted to teach her and couldn't get the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Good point.
and the other thing, just personally, I think the seasonality of so much of our housing is overemphasized, because I'm not sure that it presents any opportunity for anything. And it's sort of, I don't know, making them the bad guys for taking up space, and like, I don't know, it's some weird thing.
Well, I did too, because if you look at some of the positive things of seasonality, they're taxpayers that aren't here very much. They don't have children in schools. They don't call the police very much. So, and they don't use much water or sewer. So I mean, it's probably a good problem to have. And most importantly, I guess, it's private property, and you can't tell somebody that they're going to use their house for something they don't want to use it for. So I could end the sentence with a preposition.
I do think it was an important piece of data to explain what it represents in their report, because the only way it's reported by the census is as vacancy. And so if someone just opened the report, they'd say, we don't have a housing problem. There's 30% of them are vacant, and they wouldn't necessarily correlate that to vacation.
Yeah. Good point.
Any other thoughts down there?
Peter,
Yes.
I would suggest that, since we have a number of people in the audience, we ask public comment sooner rather than later.
Great idea. Yeah. Great idea. Anybody want to add some comments to this? Any thoughts? Can you use a microphone too, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you very much.
And there's, on the top, Marilyn, there's just a switch to flip.
Main Street. Communities and Consequences does have a website. If you Google that phrase, you will come up with a number of videos, such as we've been talking about tonight, people who are currently living in forced housing, people who, Lancaster is one of the towns that is featured. Needing to find housing up there. Very articulate
interviews that have been done, but it's been done, I think, in conjunction with public broadcasting. But it's a real good website,
Terrific,
one to.
terrific. Thank you. We'll do that.
Interesting consequences too is the thing that's been running through my mind since all this started. If you haven't read it, it's really an excellent book to go through. And Peter Francis and Lorraine Merrill are still local, so they may be people you want to touch base with.
Yeah, Peter's fabulous. I don't know Lorraine very well, but that's it. He's written books with her, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Peter's really knowledgeable demographer. Carries a lot of gravitas. Thank you. Any other thoughts? While you're coming to the microphone, let me just throw in, we did get a finished report from RKG, which is on our website, which is the existing housing condition report that was the whole basis for the public forum where they grabbed those 5 points from. A lot of data and really good reading. So go on the website and I suggest you download it to computer. It's all in color and many pages and you can really digest it. So good stuff. Sorry, Rich. Yeah, please identify yourself.
Which I'm seeing resident. As you know, I've been following this from the beginning. I have to, this whole project's been really great from the beginning. I mean, you all been doing a fantastic job. Consultants that clearly worked through the recent meeting, so well organized, so well presented.
Thank you.
And I have to say, the snacks were good. And so, I mean, to some degree, you know, we haven't yet gotten to the punchline, right? We haven't done to the other two phases where the tire meets the road. So I don't, part of me, you know, doesn't totally know how this will play into what follows. But I do think going forward, there could be potentially a little bit more objectivity when you think of what data you present. I mentioned, I think something like the density of the town is useful to show. I know it's probably not the type of data you want to put forward, but hopefully it's well known at this point, like we has mentioned it a number of times. Even some of the data, I think, I'm not sure if you had time to scrutinize it all, but I think some of it you may want to look a little deeper. I'm not sure even the square foot of the average house. I think Zach in the previous meeting told me the source of it. You know why that may be not what everybody else thinks of as square footage for the house. Most people don't consider a percentage of the garage or a back deck be factored in to the square footage. But the source of the data that was used for that, I think it was the GLA, the effective column. Jack was what you had told me you would base it on. That considers all those other things, so it kind of will distort the numbers.
So do I understand you'd like more definition of what that square footage, how it was calculated, where it came from?
Well, I'm guessing, correct me, but do you all think, when you think of square footage, you would count the garage to some degree and the back deck?
I don't think that's included. I don't want to digress too much, but Zach, do you want to quickly touch on that?
Yeah, so you're right, Rich, that we use, so first of all the data for square footage came directly from the town's assessing data. And there are two square footage numbers that we could have chosen from. One is the overall building square footage. The other is effective building area. An effective building area is basically the heated space of the house. So it would not include things like an unheated garage. It would not include an unfinished basement. So, you know, it was decided to use the effective building area because generally I think that's how most people would calculate the square footage of the home they live in. If we had chosen the overall square footage, the number would have been significantly larger. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can get it if that's of interest.
Well, also, it might have been tough to compare to the state, for example.
That's
We're
right.
trying to use an index that's relatable to other other areas, we have a sense of where we sit.
That's consistent, and most people, when they're talking about square footage, are talking about livable space.
So I guess
Most people don't live in an unheated garage.
but that's why you should not count that towards.
We didn't.
It wasn't.
The effective house, like, unless my house was the only one that factored that into the calculation.
If what you're saying is your garage is unheated and it's included in your effective space, then
Yes,
you should have a conversation with the assessor's office.
Correct.
even the 6 feet by 5 foot little front step was. There was maybe a little.
That's a correction that should be made.
So Rich, I just want to ask you a question about that. Your point about the square footage, is it that you're saying people don't understood what was being said to them?
I guess I'm
Because
thinking-
you have because you were listening to it and thinking about your house? And that it seemed like misinformation, or was it that you were thinking people are gonna get lost in information in general?
For me, it's just, I guess, one example. And, maybe me and him will double check what I'm talking about. And I'd be surprised.
Right,
if
except for
only
it's not
my
working.
house is happening. And it's not, but, another example is when New London was compared to the county of Maryland. So that includes, that is going to skew the numbers. I think that is not the best way when you're saying, oh, look at New London compared to other areas, compared to the state, the country, and then to Maryland. So when the area includes Concord, it's going to totally skew the numbers. If you compare it to, Wilmette and Sutton and something like that, okay, but,
So I'm just, I don't mean to interrupt, I'm just trying to understand, are you commenting that the information, the data that you heard was not quite what you needed and you were concerned that other people were feeling the same way? I'm just trying to pull back from the nitty gritty of the.
I think it's showing charts that, and you said you weren't trying to say that they're problem, but to me, it clearly worked. You were showing charts where New London was so out of range with everything else. And everything else, the closest thing was Merrimack County. Right?
Yeah,
You didn't have-
We're in Merrimack County, yeah.
Merrimack
But
County.
Merrimack County includes Concord. That's going to skew the numbers. If you can compare New London. So geez.
Peter, if I could just jump in and
Yeah.
provide a little bit of Rich, I think what you're saying, broadly speaking, is that there are limitations to data, and that's true across the board. And maybe we could have been more upfront about that. Maybe we could have said, there are limitations to every aspect of this. It doesn't, I don't think it necessarily pokes a hole big enough to sink the ship. But maybe we could have been a little bit more upfront to say that, that the data does present limitations. It's not going to be perfect, but if we look broadly at the patterns that we're seeing, understanding there are limitations, I think we can still come to some conclusions. I understand your point about the square footage, that, if you drill down to individual properties, maybe some of the data starts to feel a little weird. But at the scale that we're talking, I do think it holds up. And, to the point of comparing New London to the county, again, you make a really good point. And maybe we could have been more clear about some of the limitations. I don't think it's worth not sharing that information. But, I suppose we could have been a little more upfront with that.
So Rich, to move things along, I think probably be a good idea if you would, you have my email address. Why don't you send me an email with the bullet points of things that you think we should look into and, where the data is flawed, because whenever you present data, there's always a selective process. But what we try to do is look at the things that were the most important and biggest things popping off the page on the data. And that's what was presented, and those are the biggest, those are the 5 items. So, but if there's some other better way we can work with the data, we'd be glad to do it. So, I think in the interest of time, we should do that.
Well, just add a few more points, but maybe the biggest one is the whole idea of how, and to me, I think we clearly represented that not diverse is a problem. So I think I brought up the whole idea that using the lack of housing diversity, it's really important to use that point correctly and not kind of misuse it. I mean, if we suddenly were able to get maybe prefab homes that built a whole bunch more single-family homes that would be perfect for young families and get that in, that would be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it would make the diversity number worse. So that, yes, we need workforce housing, we need elderly housing to make. I'm just hoping, not trying to represent going forward, changes having changes to help hope diversity. I think that's misleading.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
How would building a number of houses that were of modest size that provided a capacity for people to work here make the diversity situation worse?
Are you talking about diversity of housing? Are you
Well,
talking
that's
about
what I-
diversity of people?
Oh, diversity of housing, yes.
Okay.
So my question is, how would that make that worse?
So it was represented, the problem with diversity, and you talk about 90% is single family homes. Right, so making that 93% would be worse, it'd be less diverse, but I would contend, it depends.
Oh, so
So it's
you're suggesting that what's on the table is building a bunch more single family homes.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
I think the prefab homes could maybe an avenue where we could get maybe some low cost housing, and that would be a good thing. So, and you would be counter to what you're kind of representing as diversity.
I understand what
I don't think diversity is.
Right. We're not suggesting the diversity is a broad term, can relate to the type of housing, the density of it. We all learned that we have a lot of single family houses. And I think we have a sense that building single family houses new is too expensive unless they're incredibly efficient and fairly small. But at that point, maybe the consensus of the community is we don't want chock-a block little tiny houses. Maybe we should build townhouses, put 2 and 2 together and then create the open space around them. So then you think about cluster housing, or there are many types of housing, and we're going to get into that the visioning stage. That's where the diversity argument really comes in.
I'm all for having a diverse set of housing, but I just want to make sure somehow that achieving quote diversity of housing is not actually the goal. The goal is more affordable in the places for.
Right, and exactly right, yes, we're on the same page.
I just have one question for Zach. I can't get the mobile version to work to pull open a tax card, but in the event that there was a fraction of a unheated space included in that data, the regional average, the national average, those are, do we know how they're getting the data that they have? Because I imagine they're using our assessing data and every other community's assessment data, because that's the only database that exists for home size. So if that's the case, and this is how assessing data is calculated, the ratios would at least be sort of apples to apples between our average, the county or the state average, and the national average of home size, as long as the collective databases of assessing data for every community is going in the same type, right? So maybe it would be helpful to have, I don't know if we can jump into those data sources and how they're calculating the square footage, but I'm not aware of any other way that reports home size on a mass database. other
Yeah,
than assessment.
I don't know the answer exactly, Adam. My assumption is that it is using the heated space, but I can do a little bit more digging into try and understand, even though we didn't present at the forum the square footage of the state and national median. We did present them to the committee in
Right.
prior meetings, but so I can do a little bit more digging and try and understand how those numbers were calculated.
I imagine our data is a piece of their data.
Probably.
That would be my guess, is the state's pulling all the different towns and cities in New Hampshire and taking the median of medians, but I don't know it off the top of
The
my
only
head.
other way that we report home size to town or to the state is when a new construction building permit comes in. We have a process that we do with the census database and the state. But that obviously doesn't equate to average of existing housing stock. New homes have historically for the last 20 years been substantially larger than some of the older homes. So I don't think that's where they're getting their data.
And just to I don't know if this might add a little bit of context, but I know for the assessed values that there was close communication between the state and the town in how those values are calculated. So I would assume that there is close communication on some of these other matters as well.
We'll find out and make sure we got it straight. Are there any other thoughts or reflections that you've heard from friends or comments that?
I'm looking at this from a different point of view. Being a senior, I won't say closer, but in any case, speaking with a lot of my friends that live up top of where I am, that attended the session last Wednesday, 13th. They were not really, they were surprised in many ways as to what the session was about. I mean, even though it was prepared well, it was written out, this is what we're going to talk about, going to do. Several of them asked me, oh, where do we go from here? I think people are coming not only to learn the variables, but also hear something about. And when we look at all those examples of 3 words that are in there, a good percentage of them are sort of negative. Something we have to think about too. And so I think that people didn't quite understand our phase that we were going through here. It's not giving us an answer, it's preparing us for the next step. And I tried to indicate that to some of the folks that we speak to. I think another issue that came up, it's on here too, taxes. The impression that some people had that, oh, if we start building homes, it's gonna cost us higher taxes. Well, I'm not sure that's where the taxes are really going to come from. Because as we have a whole scheme of things which go into taxes for properties. And the more that becomes more diverse, and the more units we have, the cost is spread out a little bit more than if we didn't do anything. And I thought that was another question that came up. And I think looking at this past summer here in town with the infrastructure changes, systems, more systems, the roads being taken care of, all those things are obvious to a lot of people. And I don't know how much money came from grants in the state, but maybe some did. But that will impact taxes as well. So your infrastructure alone, if we change nothing else,
is going to have to be revised, improved, so forth. And I think one of the greatest impacts we have is the cost of education. Because the state does not put its share. And there was an article that just came out recently. From the Department of Ed indicating that they're working on their budget. But schools are being advised that they're going to receive fewer funds. Where does the need for money come to? Taxes from private entities, our real estate taxes, things of that nature. It's asking the towns to pick up a greater portion of the requirement to do the job properly. And I think people have to understand that too. But, it's not a personal issue that you're gonna build homes and it's gonna cost us more money. That's up to the individuals that come in, get the request, go through the process, and then get the land and start building. Whether it be for affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever, compliance building, others. Those things are fine, and they've been proven to work well. Even though now we've encountered some environmental issues, which are putting a hold on. But I think that people have to understand some of those phases and put them together. So our job is not just, but at this point is phase one, we're exploring. And then we go to the next part, vision. And I think bringing other folks in that have experienced a lot of difficulties is important too. We could rearrange another session or something in there to bring them in. Because, as I said before, I think a lot of people are there expecting an answer. And when we look at the responses on all the sheets, there were multiple answers, multiple concerns. And some of them are very positive. I think we go with the positive, work out the negatives, and continue our exploration. Trying to keep everything within scope, because there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation, unfortunately.
We haven't really talked with Zach or Steve, and Steve's team about what we're gonna do with some of these comments, maybe rolling out a Q&A, but something to get information out, sort of responding to what we've gathered now that we have all this information. So we need to talk about that once you guys have some ideas put together. We
Yep,
can't be too long or it'll go stale.
Right.
Yep, I think that's a good idea.
Can I just ask, did we collect email addresses from people who showed up? We did.
Zach, I think we did collect email addresses, did we not?
Yeah, and I got an email from Crystal this morning or yesterday that said she added a exactly on the nose 100 new email addresses.
Wow.
It might be worth I don't know about you all. I don't go to our website all the time, and I'm on the commission. So maybe as more of a push rather than a pull, if we send out some of things that we think are worth following up on, even if it is, hey, go check out our website, here's the link. But it may be worth leveraging those email addresses to
Good point.
communicate.
That's a good idea, don't you think, Zach?
Especially since the report's on there now.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
maybe it's a direct link to the report is the sort of.
Yep.
The reason for emailing them.
but also responding back on the comments and questions, yeah.
Well, I equally importantly, I think it gives them we ask them to tell us more. We can communicate as well, but to me, I'd like to hear from that 100 new names, what they thought, what maybe their guided questions, but I'd like to hear more from them about what they took away from that session, including what they think, what they might think the next steps are.
Good point. We do have, on our webpage, we have that response form, but I think to Neil's point, and Neil, you tell me you don't go on our webpage. Wait a minute, I struggle with that. No,
It's not allowed.
he's not alone, I know. I like that. I like honesty. We need that.
But Peter, I'm thinking along those lines. For example, saying to people that we have that report is over 40 pages.
Yeah.
The data is over 40 pages. And I'm thinking, just piggybacking off of Neil. There's gotta be a zing. You gotta reel them in. They gotta want to go to that website. Otherwise, oh, I'm not going to a website for 40 pages that I don't, it's all data driven. What am I supposed to do? There's gotta be a little bit more immediate something that happens as a result of them going to the website.
Maybe a couple of points we could pull out and use and say, by the way, you'll find this on page 60. It's some salient points that.
So Zach, I might just say, if there's a way to be interactive, I don't know that there is, I'm not an IT person, but.
Yeah, I think this is all valid. I want to temper this a little bit just to, or maybe to balance it with, we still have 2 phases to go.
Right.
We have, some constraints that we all need to work within. So as much as we want more, I want to just temper it and balance it with, we still have 2 more phases to go.
Got it.
I think though that there are some people that are not gonna be driven to the day, right?
Right.
Just by nature.
That's what I was trying to point out. You
Yeah.
want them to go to the website for something.
If you've got those email addresses, what's the best possible use we can make of them? To get out to them, so it doesn't go really stale right away, because on our schedule, when's our next?
Well, we're gonna get, when's our next forum?
Yeah, when are we supposed to be coming back to the next stage, and that would be a public forum again, I would say.
Yeah. We
That's-
said winter sometime, winter, spring. Remember, this is when we started, in June, this is a 20-month project.
Right, but we have to keep.
And we have to keep moving.
engaged For that amount of time, that's gonna be hard.
Absolutely.
Can we point out to them what the next 2 phases are?
And Zach, I'll just interrupt for a minute. Zach, you've got to go. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for your attention here. We'll be in touch with you later, and thanks for joining us.
That sounds great. Thanks,
Great
everyone.
job, Zach.
Thank you. I have to go feed a hungry little kiddo.
Oh, man, go for it. Hug them for me.
Bye, everyone.
Same vote.
Neil, thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you for coming, guys. Great you could be here. Your dad brings a lot to us. Your dad brings a lot to us. Okay, any other comments, public or any more comments? Or do you want to get to Marilyn's question about next steps? Paul, you want? Whoa.
Paul Vance, 419 Bunker Road. And I really don't want to extend this. I want to say, I think we'll really put down in the last meeting, this meeting, the forums that you had earlier have set the stage for a lot. And I think Marilyn's comments, other people on the board's comments, show an urgency to get to it. And I think that's great. And I think I want, as someone that's been to all those and sat in the back, watched. I wanted to suggest that maybe the commission take a step to focus the continuing thing. And I know it's sort of, you want things to come up from the beginning, but I would sort of say that there's probably only 3 real areas that we're talking about. Maybe there's more senior housing, somehow to provide less expensive housing to the normal person. And workforce housing or affordable housing. And, maybe tie the data that they have, and I think they probably have this data, but it wasn't maybe presented this way. Just for example, workforce housing forum that you have with all the employers representing hundreds of employees and, nominally probably many more.
that weren't represented by the lawyer, but a lot of. That was a great thing. It showed a great need. And it didn't really say how to get there, but showed the need. I think they probably have the data that says between them and what's been done, what salaries are, what the people that they're hiring and that can't live here, what the ranges they pay and what the ranges are. And currently, how many live here? In other words, I don't know that's gonna drive the discussion, but it's gonna be an add-on to that. That says, okay, that there's some heft to that. And that if you were to identify that, I think like all of us when we're involved in this, you have to talk about the downsides. To talk about changing the character of the town, smaller housing, multifamily housing, taxes. Not an expert on taxes and infrastructure and stuff. But I think there was a real interest in the data that came out. And your challenge, I think, is to focus the data and that interest. Maybe by saying there seems to be an interest in sort of 3 areas. These are some of the things we're thinking about. So that's, keep up the good work. I just sitting in the back of the room, that was sort of what came to me.
Very helpful to get that focus. Thank you. Thank you. Good suggestions. And by the way, you probably haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But in that report, the RKG report that's online, there's a lot of information on people who live in town and where they work. And also people who work in town and where they live, which is pretty interesting stuff. And I thought about that a lot and reminded myself that one question is, well, gee, why should we worry so much about somebody who needs to drive a long distance if they want to live in Boscawen and they want to work in New London? Well, eventually somebody who lives in Boscawen, just as an example, is going to say, gee, I'm close enough to Concord. I can get a better job there. I don't need to drive to New London. So it exacerbates the employment problem because of that commuting cost and hassle long term. So there is an effect from commuting. It's a cost, it's a wear and tear, and it opens up other opportunities. So also have to keep in mind, I would add, as I reflected on that data, is the effect of more and more as a result of COVID, the increase in remote workers who don't need to be in the office more than 2, maybe 3 times a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. But that means there's more flexibility in their working styles. So, good points. And that report, I skimmed it first and then I started digging into it. It's really juicy stuff. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. After our forum last week, many of us were talking together afterwards. One of the thoughts that kept coming up was, or the observations, we did not track younger folks, number of families. In numbers, we were hopefully be a good balance with. And there were some discussions as to how can we do that.
We didn't attract them, you mean?
No, they weren't there.
Yeah.
And there were some thoughts of maybe another forum, but on a different day and different time, in order to provide time for those individual families or members of the come for me. You have younger kids, you have a set pattern. And there may be certain times of the weekend or the week that are better off than 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, which works for most of us. But maybe we ought to reconsider maybe a follow-up.
Good point. I think maybe a time to consider doing it is Saturday morning, when at least if there are 2 parents involved in the family, one of them can go with the kids and at least the other one can go. No, it's a good point. Just wanted the next timing, the timing for the event is something we'll be discussing. So, Marilyn once again put her finger on as a segue to the next issue, which is really what's the next step? And what do we do now? And, what I'm hearing is we should work hard on storytelling. I can relate to you that we spent a fair amount of our money from the grant on the RKG study. That's what we wanted. We knew it was gonna be expensive. And so we do have 2 more stages to go through. We have a bill from Colby Sawyer for the event, which is around $2,500. So the cost of the event was not high. The consultant's time, of course, to be added on to it. And then we have the RKG study itself, which was the basis for going forward and will be a great reference for us going forward. So Zach commented that we have to be careful about our resources. That's, we were granted $103,000 and we spent it wisely, but we have to keep an eye on it. So for next steps, I don't envision a storytelling event being awfully expensive.
And in fact, I've had some conversations with a resident that I think you mostly know, although I didn't tell her I was going to share this, so I won't say who it is, with some pretty a very good videography resume, who has experienced some pretty substantial housing issues, and she's willing to help out if that's something that maybe not necessarily from a storytelling and forum capacity, but even between now and then, that may be something that we could add in pretty low cost, if any cost.
Great idea. Great idea. So let's just make a list. Neil said he had somebody and he referenced the teacher. I know somebody actually is a friend of Neil's, about the same age bracket or family stage of life, I'll say, who may be willing and quite effective. You suggested one, Adam, that you may have.
So does this mean that we might consider actually soliciting nice way somehow folks that are working at the hospital? Or folks that are working at Lori Shav's Bakery?
Yep.
I mean, these are real people with real issues. And I wouldn't necessarily want to be redundant with an event we've already had, but sort of going back to that well, but taking it in a slightly different turn, letting the employees speak to their issues and troubles, so there's journey.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's live and in person makes a better outcome or result versus having them taped and having sitting people watching. I think it's a little more interactive to have live and in person people. But I just putting it out there.
Yeah, your point's well taken. It's one thing to ask somebody to come, for example, meet with us some evening and tell us their story. That's one level of bravery. There's another level of capability of being videoed. I know from having been videoed recently, and it was abominable. It's not very good. It's another skill. I don't have it, but asking somebody to do that, I think, would be a heavy lift. But certainly, and the next level, of course, might be before a public forum. Come and tell us a story. So I think a lot of it has to do with if we know of somebody or we learn of somebody who might be a good fit, is talk to them. Let's have coffee with them, get to know their story, and get to know them as an individual. And if you think that it would be a good fit, ask them if they first come and talk to us. And let's hear the stories ourselves and decide how effective they could be and if they'd be willing to do it in a larger audience. And the larger audience, the panel could also include employers. To the extent.
Do like a tandem,
Yeah.
Lori comes with one of her people.
Yeah, I've spoken to Lori several times. She feels passionately about this.
But also, I wonder if you could do it as opposed to sticking them up on a format like this. Where the subject matter would be brief and pointed, and then people actually from the audience. If you've got a story and you're willing to share it, just raise your hand and tell people. As opposed to having,
right.
That might be much more
That's a good
comfortable for
idea.
people.
Engaging the audience.
Yeah, and you could set it up, so you prepare, if you've got a story. And you'd like to tell it, this would be an opportunity in a very informal way, but I don't even know how that fits in with what we're trying to do when. You know, I mean, I think we've got to keep the story out there because. And then, of course, the people that, there are those people that. Don't care that it's a problem. I did hear some of that. What's the problem?
I heard that too.
Yeah.
So I just would like to point out. And I feel very strongly about this, and one of the people that needs to come and talk is the assistant to Will in the town clerk's office. That person, in order for them to participate in all of the town clerk tax collectors activities, has to be a resident of New London. I have been drafted to be that resident to fill in those slots. And I've given them a deadline to find somebody, but the person has to live in London. And Diane does not, and she has tried to find a place to live in New London.
You want to talk to her and see if she?
Yes, it's very compelling. I mean, I'll sit with her while we explain. That's just the RSA that's out there.
So it's a personal story, so she has to be willing to share and maybe chat with her, and you want me to join you for coffee or something
We chat about it all the time.
okay, but ask her if she'd be willing to come talk with us.
Yes, she said she would.
She would, just tell her.
I think that if we did it with you first and let her get the feel of it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Wonderful idea.
I think it's a good idea to share it with us, but I think that we know. And we've talked to these people and we know, I think we need to make the audience broader, if that's a way to keep it, to have a mini gathering or something we hear in the next.
I agree.
I'm happy to have someone come and talk to us, but I think we know what the problem is, and telling, you know, this person's story, and this person's story, and this person's story is just emphasizing it, just we know it, but where we need to get it out is to a greater audience, so that they get it.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll understand what a difference it might make, and I remember one of the most poignant moments at that Baptist church thing was when the gal from the VNA said, what they do not understand is that if these people can't find places to live, then when they call us and they need us to come to their house, we will have to say no.
No.
That, you know, that really put it out there.
Well,
They
and
are saying no. They don't have,
They are,
They're already saying no.
they are saying no.
very few hours.
People don't want to commute.
You know, just to go back to the video thing and, it's one thing to speak to a small group, but if we're expecting or would like someone with a really poignant story to say it to a larger group. The option of doing a video is still, I think, should at least be presented and let them choose. Because you can still have videos that are very compelling and so forth. And I know with working with a number of veterans and other clients, that's much easier for them to tell their story, much more comfortable, almost as though they're being interviewed. So I just want to put that out there in terms of your conversations with folks.
What about if you could invite like a dozen people to a circle
Focus group.
focus group of just where they could talk about it, and would they be willing to be videoed while they're talking about it? It could be really, you know, there'd be a group of people there. They wouldn't just be standing up in front of a mic or whatever, talking and being video. They'd be sharing stories and I don't know, I mean, that's complicated. Somebody has to make a video.
So it has to be very skilled in order to.
Yeah,
So
but it would be really, I think it'd be really meaningful.
I agree, I
And do it.
overemphasize that these are very personal stories, in terms of how and where they are at, and so how they convey that and their comfort level with that, I think we need to be able to.
I think the idea of being sort of sponsoring somebody. So if somebody from the hospital comes with an employee from the hospital, if I came with Diane. I mean, I think that makes it more real when you have the employer and the employee who can't find housing. The employer can't help them. Or can't find it for them. So I think finding a sponsor for them will make them more comfortable, period.
Good. Okay, so next steps. What should we do?
So I just also want to say, one of the feedbacks I got, and I don't know how to dispel this, is why is New London responsible for this? What are you gonna say, Kevin?
I was gonna say, we're responsible for, we're not trying to solve everybody else's problems in the school district. We're trying to deal with what we feel is our responsibility and our own problems. I would have a hard time with that too, but
I don't think there's an answer, except that we are working on it.
but we're responsible in the other sense. We're responsible people and we want to help a situation that's not tenable get better. I don't know.
We're responsible to our community.
Exactly.
We don't know that.
What
I
else
think
would you
that-
say?
I think the problem with that question is that that citizen is asking, why is that my problem? And I think we heard just now why that's their problem, because if you have an issue, a safety issue, a health issue, like as with the VNA, if there isn't somebody who can live and work here affordably, then you aren't going to have those kind of social services or those, any capacities to make this community, which has been so vital, remain vital. And that is every citizen's problem. We happen to be people that are sitting around the table trying to gather information and pose solutions to those problems. But this problem, and it is a problem, is the community's problem. And thinking about that in the context of, well, why should I participate in the solution to that problem is, to me, very problematic. Word problem keeps showing up in this sentence, but it's how do you make a community work if the only thing you think is, well, I've got mine. Let somebody else figure the rest of it out.
I'm not the one who said.
I know.
And I think it's important to realize that this question is asked in every single community. I had to laugh last week when I was at a housing meeting in my own town and someone stood up and said this very thing, you know, why is it Hanover, Hartford, and Lebanon's responsibility to solve the housing problem for the entire Upper Valley? And, you know, it's interesting perspective. They see it as they're doing it. People that come to our meetings will see that they're doing it. The hard part is we all have very limited bandwidth to stay up to date on what's going on in our own towns, that we can't really follow what's going on in the other towns. And unfortunately, I haven't figured out a great source of sort of keeping up on the other towns. You know, the Regional Planning Commission certainly in their newsletter and things has stuff, but the average person's not getting that newsletter. You know, the Valley News tends to cover a lot of different towns and what they're doing, but I haven't figured out how to educate not only our citizens, but of all of the towns of the wider Upper Valley and beyond, what each town is doing, because I think most towns are doing something. I mean, you can't open the paper without an article about housing, and you know, I think there are a lot of efforts going on, but it can feel like to residents of any town that they're the only ones doing anything. And I'm not sure, you know, it's a problem bigger than us. And I'm not sure how we answer that.
Well, I think part of it that, you know, we haven't heard for a while about the regional project and what's happening with that. And I think we need to cross-pollinate that.
And that project has wrapped up.
But there hasn't been any summary, there hasn't been any outcome from that. I mean,
I'm sorry,
From the Navigator project.
yeah,
Didn't know that existed.
That was Renee from the Planning
No,
Commission that
she did
attended.
several presentations at meetings that I know you were at,
Oh,
so.
I didn't know that that was like a full project.
But
Yeah,
I
we-
could to summarize that,
Mhm.
what happened with that.
well, I pressed Renee for different pieces of work that were coming out of that. And by the way, out of that Navigator grant came the cost for the mailer that we put out for the event. Which was about, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000. So it's pretty good ticket, but that was just a funding sort of thing. But I have in the past pressed Renee for actually doing presentations. One of them was the employer component of the survey that they did. Because we'd heard about the resident side of it, but not the employer side. And it was helpful, but wasn't earth shattering. So I'm not quite sure what we would get out of that. Remember that the Navigator grant purpose was to try to synergize the towns, the 3 towns together. Sunapee backed out. And so that they were empowered by knowledge of the others and what they were doing. And I tried to make that happen, and it didn't happen. So I can see what she could do. I don't think that program's running anymore. Okay, why don't we're running out of time here. Thank you. Why don't we talk about our next meeting? And I think we all have a sense of what we need to do as far as assignments of trying to sponsor. It's a good word. Thank you, Ann. Trying to sponsor a storyteller. I'll get to work on the community and consequences resource to see if there's something there, a video, or I have the book and certainly the webpage. And 3 weeks from today, of course, we'll leapfrog over Thanksgiving. But 3 weeks from today, and I don't know about availability of rooms, is December 11th. And I have a conflict. That's Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission night. Jerry can cover that, so I can do it that night.
I have to be at the budget committee meeting, which I'm missing tonight to be here. So Whipple Hall essentially will not be available on Wednesday nights, more or less until budget committee is over.
Okay. Well, we can do it here if we need to.
Yep. I will be at most of the budget committee meetings. I have to present that night for my budget. And then I have to be there as a department head. So
Right, of course. How about the 10th?
The 10th, we have a planning board meeting that night. Admittedly, I have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night meetings every week in December. So my schedule is going, other than Christmas week. My schedule is going to be tough.
Okay. Can we meet in the day?
That works for me. I don't know for other folks. Is that work?
Meet during the
Meet
day.
during the day?
What day?
I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. Would a morning meeting work?
Probably not for Neil on some.
I actually had this conversation with Neil today on an unrelated event. And he said he could do.
You could.
Yep.
Is that possible for Marilyn? Is that possible for you? Not to put you on the spot, but
On Monday.
You can bring your lunch.
Monday.
Yeah.
could do
It says not a Monday.
Ann said not a Monday. We could do a lunch meeting.
I'm begging.
We could do it in Sid Crook.
That's the employees' lunchroom. So if we're doing lunch, then let's try to avoid that. But Whipple Hall is available during the day.
Okay.
That's true.
So I'm just throwing out ideas here. How about on the 11th, which is 3 weeks from today and is a Wednesday, we would do a lunch meeting.
Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to be a lunch meeting, it can be at that time of day, I mean, whatever.
Right, right. What I mean is brown bag, bring, if you want to bring your lunch with you. I'm not serving lunch.
A noonish meeting.
Noonish meeting on the 11th.
I have no idea.
And I have no idea.
Never mentioned on.
Okay,
Yeah, it's fun. Fine.
Would it be helpful to send out a doodle poll with some times?
Sure.
Send out a what?
Sort of a doodle poll. So if you get a bunch of options and you select the ones you're available for. It's easy.
Click on
Oh,
it.
wait, I-
It gives you all the options with all the people's names, you pick what.
And then we can see, Neil did say that first thing in the morning is probably easier for him.
Well,
Not see that.
I will offer to the commission that I have tried to polling this commission and it didn't work.
Well, Adam's gonna do it.
Adam will do it.
Adam's gonna, okay.
I was, the conversation with Neil, because it was to meet with him about a bicycle and pedestrian thing this morning, was that first thing in the morning is easier for him. He can push the start of his day a little bit, and his wife is available to help with the kids in the morning. So I don't know, lunch versus,
What's,
I can
At
do
6
first- I
a.m.
can do
no, like
what's first thing?
8 or 8:30.
Got a conflict on the 11th.
I'm out on morning, that or kind of time morning, Thursdays and Fridays for sure.
Okay, but Tuesdays and Thursdays it would have potential.
Okay, let's do
Or
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays is what I meant to say,
That's-
sorry.
Monday's hard to remember.
Yeah, and
Tuesday and Wednesday, or
Tuesdays.
during the, like the lunch thing, I can do that too.
okay.
So the 10th,
So let's say I'll send out some times, lunchtime versus 8 o'clock start time. Peter and I will put together a couple
Cool.
of date options.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
put some ideas together. We'll get back to you.
That's great.
By 8 o'clock, I've usually had at least one cup of coffee.
Terrific.
I wanna know about the pumpkin.
I was just gonna say, let's hear about the holiday.
The Pumpkinhead competition.
We lost.
We were not successful.
We did
It
not win.
was a noble effort. It was very well done.
It's rigged. Just throwing that out there. Library wins every year.
Work or their sportsmanship, come on.
In the government category, they do.
on.
It brought attention. It was well done, tasteful.
We're scheming next year's already, so stay
Maybe you
tuned.
should scheme to somehow get yourself in a different category.
You know, we've talked about suggesting some categories we might be able to stack the deck with, but
So what we discovered, and I don't know if this was discussed, that we handing out the candy. I would say 80% of people were not. That's why they were not.
That should not be news.
Yeah, no, it
Okay.
would, young people, young families, all the people you want to come to all the events and they live somewhere else, but they're happy to come.
But
to
there
the
were a
event.
lot of. people.
That's fine. Which I think is fine, just for the purpose of,
They probably go to the school district.
right, but for the purpose,
Very
the
much.
real purpose was letting them know about the forum.
Yeah.
Not just.
but there may be value in people
Yeah.
willing to attend another town's meeting to learn more. Maybe they've tried to live here and they can't. Maybe,
Exactly.
I mean,
Or they'll learn that it's a nice town and they should live here.
on that note, though, I do have, and I haven't even shared this with you because yesterday and today were so busy. But I did go do an inspection of the new units at 406 Main Street. They are almost ready to come online. They're really nice units. I don't know if the rent, their market rate, although I will say for as nice as they are, I was surprised at what that market rate is. He's trying to be, as affordable as he can be.
Market rate rental.
It is. I would tell you what it is, except for I'm not sure that it's entirely public, so I don't want to do that yet. But that being said, I asked him, I thought obviously you've all been working very hard on the forums and stuff, but maybe it would be interesting to try to do like a site visit and do a tour. And he did say at some point he would be willing to do a presentation to break down the numbers on how he made it work. Obviously, he's the contractor, so he said his numbers he thinks are about 18% less than what your typical developer who doesn't own the company and isn't buying things at cost would be doing it for. But I think that could be interesting data that would maybe just be kind of a fun thing for us to do that sort of like re-energize too. I don't know exactly. I didn't get to chat with Kim. I'm not sure that we can invite the public to go along to parade through these units. So I'm not sure what that looks like from our board standpoint.
Called. Just the number of the street.
Yeah, I don't think there's a name to the development
Okay.
or anything.
Did they end up with 5 units?
They did. So it's 2 below and then 3. Yep.
Well, I think it would be a breach of open meeting laws if there was a quorum there, right?
I think there's an ability to, I think there's a carve out in the law that allows you to do these sort of development, well, it's not a site visit because site visit is particular for land use boards that are making land use decisions. There's really particular rules around that. But there are, like, you can go to trainings as a board without that. So I think we would have to make it some sort of right. And that being said, I didn't ask him necessarily about the potential for the public being invited. Because that part really hadn't crossed my mind yet. And maybe he's willing to do that, but if it's something you want me to look into, I just, I can try to make that work. It would probably be something that would be sort of last minute because they're hoping to be moving in January 1st. So it would probably be this is just the date and time that we've got available, and hopefully people who could make it could.
I'm very interested.
Okay.
Yeah, are all the units filled?
2 of the 3 or 2 of the 5 are spoken for. I'm not sure who they were, but they're people that are somehow in the mix of the people working on things. I think word of mouth. I don't think anything's been advertised yet. And he did say that he knew one of the units, even after move-in, would be available to show people. So I'm not sure exactly what that meant,
But the numbers would, of course, as a retired developer, I'm very interested in the numbers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
and I think that
What's the-
part, we could, hold at a meeting down the road,
Yeah.
when his closeout costs are all in. There's still some work that we're gonna have to hold a bond to, move the parking in front and stuff because we're past the November 1st date of being able to work in a state road. So that stuff will have to happen in the spring, but the units will be occupied.
Right? Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
Okay.
I should also quickly touch on the New London housing projects. I learned today that the Twin Pines case before the Housing Appeals Board, which was supposed to have a trial tomorrow at 10 a.m., has been put on hold. On the hearing schedule for the Housing Appeals Board, it shows it's still being held, but it's going to be opened and closed and put on hold. I suspect there's some sort of procedure going on now, whether it's disclosure of information or resolution underway, I don't know, but
Maybe negotiation.
maybe negotiations, I'm just speculating. But
Meaning it's,
they're not gonna hold
they're not gonna hold them.
They're not gonna hold-
It's not canceled, but
No.
something's going on.
something.
Pause.
But don't show up down there as I was thinking of doing, just out of curiosity. And so
Water,
water, nothing new.
Gonna rain.
Thanks for coming.
So continuum, does that just end or what?
well, that's a slightly different picture.
Oh, I understand.
To be determined.
Yeah, no news there.
But I don't think nobody has said we've had it.
Correct.
Nobody has said that
Yeah.
yet formally.
Yeah, I've not heard that.
So just. Anybody have any ideas about who's taking over the dry cleaner?
I don't have the information on that.
Did he sell it?
It's Jeff.
I just know there's a possibility that there's somebody. I don't know. No.
Just remind you we're being recorded, so don't disclose something you're not comfortable with everybody.
I'm not disclosing it as fact, I'm disclosing being upfront with you all that. Maybe that would.
Well, it's not unknown that Jeff's trying to sell it for a long
Correct.
time.
Right.
So I don't know anything about, if I did, I wouldn't say, but I don't know.
And the cleaner part is operating.
Right.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
picked up my shirts the other day.
When that open sign is hanging out,
As
he's
long as the
there,
flag is out.
Right.
Great.
like the train stop.
That being said, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?